conundrum when you think about that we are all humans, that's what we bring to the workplace, to work as humans. Why is the organization not responding sufficiently in terms of truly making us be our full human being, using our full body, and allowing us to do what in essence is our best day's work? Why doesn't the organization allow us to do our best day's work? So I'm going to talk to you about that as a topic, but also about what we've discovered in terms of the power of thanks, the power of saying thank you within that mix. So who am I? I'm Derek Irvine. I'm the co-author of a book called The Power of Thanks. And that book is packed full of our experiences of working with some of the world's leading organizations. Organizations like Procter & Gamble, General Electric, Intuit, Symantec, a lot of leading organizations, and how they have gone through the journey of utilizing the power of thanks to help sustain their cultures, to help improve their cultures over time. As an organization, what we do is we use the power of thanks to engage employees, build retention, and create more positive cultures. And there's a copy of the book for everybody that would like a copy of the book. Make sure you see either me or Lee over here has a box. So there's a free copy for everybody at the end of the session, so bonus for having come along. So let's get started. There's three topics that I want to talk about. As I said, number one is what does it mean to work human? Two is to look at the power of thanks within that, or what we call social recognition. And three is to look at some key success stories, and I'll share some success stories as we go through the presentation. But first of all, when you think about that question of bringing more humanity into the workplace, what does that mean? What does that conjure up in your mind? And maybe we just take the flip chart and throw a few words up there. I mean, you volunteered that you've seen both sides of a fence. What does it mean to work more human?
Emotional decision making.
Sorry?
Some element of emotional decision making.
Yeah, good one. Emotional decision making as opposed to just the facts and figures.
Having the space and capacity to get to really know your fellow colleagues, and for the organisation that you work with then to actively support that and ensure that space is created.
Yes, that's a very interesting word to use, giving you the space to be able to do that, to be able to facilitate a sandbox, I suppose, to be able to do that. Any other words? What does it mean to bring more humanity into the work?
If you're human, you're social.
If you're human, you're social. Yeah. Give me that one again.
Making it meaningful.
Meaningful.
More individual options.
Carry on, we're almost done.
Caring.
Fun.
Elements of discretion,
Discretion in terms of I have individual right to decide to do something differently.
Yeah, based on my judgment.
Yes, based on your judgment. Good. The handwriting gets worse as it goes down. Good. One last one. We probably have room for one last bullet point. Passion. Good. These are truly excellent words. And is anybody familiar with the work of Professor Gary Hamel? He's a professor in London Business School, and he spent the last 20 to 25 years studying the evolution of management. And he's written a book that's called The Future of Management, What Matters Now. And his entire thesis is that we're going through a major transformation in terms of how we need to manage our people. And what matters now, in essence, are all of these words that you put up here. In terms of creating a competitive advantage for your company because you're doing things that are somewhat different to how other companies do things, but also in order to bring out really the best in your people, that these are the words that really matter to employees. So just to share a little bit of that story and how it's evolved over time. Take a quick sip of water. I mean, if you look back over the history of time and humans' interaction with the workplace, you've got slavery, you've got the Industrial Revolution, and you look at the human being and you say what sort of muscles were important during that time. It was all about our hands. It was about our muscles. It was bringing that to the workplace. And in fact, the very definition of the term labor and thinking about how we manage labor comes from this sort of era. And I mean, it's that many hundreds or thousands of years ago that word has carried forward into management practice. And then in more recent times, the organ that became important for human resources to be focusing on was the mind. and the knowledge revolution. And now suddenly we needed to think about labour in the workplace not only being hands, muscles, but they also now had minds. So what was the next organ that we potentially need to be worried about as HR professionals? Well, some would argue that maybe the next organ is actually not an organ at all. It's going to be that we're going to be taken over by robots. And there's much talk about that in the Financial Times regularly. I see it about the robots not only taking over manual tasks, but also taking over intelligent tasks through artificial intelligence. But in fact, the organ that Professor Gary Hamel and organizations like ourselves find through the work that we do with the companies that we work with, the organ that's becoming way more important is indeed the heart. Not the physical heart, but the emotional heart. And for employees to truly be able to say, well, I bring my hand, I bring my mind, I bring my best capabilities, but I always bring my emotions. I'm able to say that I heart this company that I work for. And you see that in engagement surveys, in employees being able to respond that I'm proud of where I work for, and I would thoroughly recommend where I work to colleagues and friends. That's as a consequence of an employee being able to say, I heart this organization. Is that something that you all monitor? Do you monitor that, would I refer my organization to a colleague or friend? I mean, it's an important question in engagement surveys, etc. So at Global Force, we call this the human decade. We think that there is a genuine transition in terms of contemporary management practice to this decade of the human decade, where this becomes a potential competitive differentiator. Because really organizations have done everything else in terms of analysis of operational costs, analysis of technology, and everybody is as good as everybody else. But this is one area where organizations can truly shine, can truly make a difference, is through the emotional quotient of their employees and the knock-on impact that has on the customer proposition ultimately. Now some of you might be saying, some cynics in the room might be saying, well, at the end of the day, paycheck is all that matters. And sometimes in Scandinavian countries or in Germanic conferences, I get a little bit of that. But isn't that enough? People are paid to do their job. They have a role description, and that's all that matters. If they don't do their role description, well, they're out the door. And, that's such a Dickensian or Dickens type approach to management to think about that, because it really is about the whole self. And if I often say that the relevance of being human has no cultural barriers. We all are human, no matter what part of the world we come from. That's the key criteria. Does your organization employ human beings? And if it's in Scandinavia or it's in Germany or it's in Japan, they all employ human beings, and it's a core human need. It's an area that not only is being studied by Professor Gary Hamel, but also Burson. You'll know Josh Burson, maybe some of you have heard of him. He's a leading HR analyst that has become a part of Deloitte HR consulting group. He's created a new framework where he talks about organizations becoming irresistible to their employees, that they simply feel irresistible as a magnetic draw. And these are the 5 factors that he identifies in creating that irresistible draw: meaningful work, hands-on management, a positive work environment, growth opportunity, and trust in leadership. And you'll see right at the heart of that is this humanistic workplace, evidence again of this as a vocabulary. You could say engagement was an important topic and continues to be an important topic, but what can give us more of that engagement? Well, it's this approach to thinking about employees from a whole human point of view. And buried underneath that is a culture of recognition, a place where we celebrate when we do great human things together. Now, I'm going to position that I believe recognition is a contributor in many more of these places. I believe recognition contributes to, in terms of an investment in management development, because it helps managers to be better managers, to be giving feedback constantly. I think it leads to a very modern performance management approach, being able to gather the opinion of your colleagues rather than only gathering the opinion of a single manager. It leads to inspiration. It leads to greater a sense of focus on the mission and the purpose of the company, because by recognizing when we're doing great things together, we get reminded of what it is that we're doing together. Here's an example of some of that humanity in the workplace. Office space has become a very important component in this, creating a human workplace. This is the Google offices in Dublin. It looks like your average back garden. The only thing that's missing in Ireland is that it should be raining, but I guess they haven't developed rain within the office just yet. It would make it a little bit uncomfortable anyway. But what I wanted to share with you is some research that our organization is called the Work Human Institute, a group of researchers, academics that have come together to study this as a topic, so that we're not only putting out there an idea, but we've got solid research behind the idea and the evidence that we're seeing. And we asked over 1,000 employees working in medium to large companies across a number of international marketplaces, what did it mean to you to see more humanity in the workplace? And you've already reflected many of the key words. Number one was respect for me as an individual. Number two, that they, i.e. the leaders of the organization, truly care about employees' well-being, and that all are recognized and appreciated for what it is that we do. When you look deeper into that report, these were the foundational blocks that really led to building a more human workplace. I've already spoken about appreciation, but if you look at the type of culture that you're building, a learning culture, a fun culture, a culture with great trust. And in terms of communications, employees played back quite considerably that they wanted to make sure they had an employee voice, a place where their opinion could be heard on all topics strategic, a place where their opinion could be heard on all topics cultural. That it's not in a human workplace, as you identified, it's not just enough for management to decide this is what the workplace is going to be like and we're going to ripple it down. We actually want to democratize. Somebody said earlier, to be human is to be social. To be social is to gather the opinions of everybody, is to gather the opinions of the community, and to make that social community become the way that in fact you set strategy, you set your culture. So a big playback, and obviously doing that in a transparency way, a big playback coming from the voice of the employees in terms of this is what's important to build a human workplace. So how does that idea resonate with you? Does that feel like it's something that's current in your organizations?
I think there's pockets of it, and I think what's interesting is if one of those is missing, it totally undermines the rest.
Yes, that's an excellent point. It's sort of like nothing is agreed or nothing is possible until everything comes together as a jigsaw, because otherwise you leave a hole in the jigsaw, the picture's not complete.
And it can be undermined particularly.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the biggest challenges I see too, is that you have a kind of a committee or a group that says we're going to do this, and then if senior management aren't truly behind it, or there's a little degree of cynicism, it all unwinds.
Because you'd argue there's a hierarchy, probably trust is the first, because if you haven't got trust, but those really don't count, because nobody will believe their voice is being listened to.
Yes.
They won't believe there's transparency, they won't actually recognise there's respect and gratitude.
Yeah, exactly, good point. Any other comments?
You also mentioned the simplicity was one of the previous slides. But actually, if you think about it, and the diversity of people, obviously some of these things need to be created or generated in different ways, because not everything is going to be experienced in the same way by all individuals.
Yes.
So I'm just,
Yeah. I think that's one of the.
wondering how we best
I think
do
that,
that.
I think that's one of the biggest surprising things that I find in talking to clients that are going down this path, is the resilience and capability of each individual employee, and their resilience and capability when you combine them together as groups and you allow them to do things. Because I think that's been kind of traditionally one of the big speed bumps, is that management thinks it knows best, and that's the old way to manage philosophy, that all knowledge is in the most senior individual at the height of the organizational chart. But the very definition of what's happening in the world of work right now, and the whole social breaking down of barriers, is that there are ways to facilitate the voice and the capabilities of people and to trust them, to let them decide what's appropriate, strategically or from a culture point of view. But obviously you need a sandbox within which to safely do that. Any other last comments before I move on to the... No? Good. Well, if you do have any interest in this topic, a little bit of an advert here. There's a fabulous conference coming up, and I know it's quite short notice, but there's a fabulous conference coming up if you haven't already heard about it. And in fact, Professor Gary Hamill is speaking at that conference, together with Sean Accor, who's a leading Harvard professor. And Sean Accor's passion is the study of happiness in the workplace. And he's accumulated, again, a decade of research that shows that the remembering to give more recognition. They just forget to do it. So it's not that they're anti it, they just forget to do it. So one of the most powerful ways to bring a culture of thank you alive, a culture of appreciation, a culture of respect, a culture of we're doing great things together as human beings, is to build a structure that puts control of that in the hands of every single employee, and giving them the right, giving them the invitation to do it often. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. So if you think about yourself, have you been recognized in the last month? Hands up if you've been recognized in the last month. Now, this is a HR group, so I would expect a very strong performance. So that's about a half of the room. I'd say about 50% of the room. Well, statistics say, the same research that I was talking about earlier, that only 20% of employees have been recognized in the last month. And in fact, when you take that to the last 6 months, you discover that only 33% of employees have been recognized in the last 6 months. I mean, think about that. There's 70% of employees walking around feeling, hey, nobody's recognized me in the last 6 months. And even if they haven't, landed a spaceship on the moon, but if they have just consistently done day in, day out what's required of them, and they've consistently delivered quality to customers, or they've consistently got the accounting reports in exactly on time, I mean, isn't that something where they should get a little bit of feedback that says, hey, I noticed that you consistently did that all of the time, and I want to say thank you for having done that. There's 70% of employees going around feeling, nobody really notices me around here. It's one of the key reasons that people leave organizations, because they feel that their supervisor, their manager doesn't understand nor appreciate what they do. So a key way to fix retention is to increase that figure. When we asked employees, would you work harder if you felt that your efforts would be recognized? Well, it's done. 78% of employees said that they would work harder. So 78% discretionary effort sitting on the table, waiting to be maximized. If employees, the 70% who aren't getting any recognition, if you could say, hey, we have a new culture around here. We want to appreciate when people do things consistently, do things well, and we want to appreciate when people go above and beyond. 78% of them say that they would work harder. So when you think about what are the things that you think recognition could impact in your company, let's make a quick list maybe of those. What do you think yourselves? What might recognition done well impact?
Enthusiasm.
The enthusiasm? Yeah, excellent point. Sorry? Performance.
Productivity.
Attitude.
That's a very interesting one. Being able to manage and sculpt the attitude in the company, being able to say that's the type of attitude we'd like to have. So let's recognize people that display that attitude so that we can actually do culture management, if you like, to actually manage the culture in your company.
Collaboration and teamwork.
Collaboration. I heard a voice. What was that one?
Retention.
Retention. You folks are fast for filling a whole page. That's bravo to all of you. Recognition back. So those are all excellent points, and I think, what that demonstrates, because the most frustrating conversation that I very often have when it's the first time meeting an organization is, the power thanks, recognition, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that's some gift cards in a drawer, or it's a manager having a team meeting, round of applause, or it's a pizza party, or a night at the pub. Is that recognition? Is that creating a recognition culture? Yes, but if we're to take a continuum, it's here, and then there's multiple steps, all the way over here, which is having a culture that's filled with all of these things. A culture that's enthusiastic, where performance is genuinely recognized, it's rewarded, where productivity is recognized and rewarded, where we're building the right sort of attitude that we want to have together as a company, and therefore we celebrate when we see that attitude. We collaborate together, and we reward each other, we pat each other on the back. We work as teams together. We have great energy, and all of that feeds through to performance and retention. Those are the words that conversation ought to be about. Not about, what reward should we be handing out, and how many pizza parties or nights in the pub or gift cards should we be giving out. Those are the nitty-gritty details much later on. What you want is something that truly becomes irresistibly infectious, so that all managers, all teams, all people feel attracted to this culture of just celebrating who we are as human beings and celebrating when we do great things together. They're poles apart. So here's what the research says that gets impacted. Employees who have been recognized in a past month, well, they're 2 times more likely to be highly engaged. Now, all of you, I'm sure, understand the significance of having higher levels of engagement and how it filters through to the bottom line in terms of many different things. Those that are getting recognized are 2 times more likely to be highly engaged, 34% more likely to believe that their company is the best place to work. So if you sign up to, for example, the Great Place to Work Institute research, you'll know the impact that has on attraction of key talent, because many employees want to work for organizations that are considered great places to work. So it improves the cost of your talent attraction strategies. 35% are more likely to say that their culture is fun and enjoyable, and 37% more likely to believe that the company cares about them. So this is just as a result of recognizing when you do great, consistent work or above and beyond, it has this ripple effect. It's like dropping a stone into the ocean, and it has this ripple effect. I can't remember who it was. Is it Gandhi said that when you drop a stone into the ocean, it might seem like a small step, but the ocean is never the same again. And that's what you're doing. You're dropping these multiple stones of recognition and humanity around the workplace, and the ocean will never be the same again as you build more and more momentum behind it. Other pieces of research we asked employees, so how does reward and recognition make you feel? Well, it makes me feel, 92% feels appreciated, I feel prouder of the place I work, and 86% said I feel happier in the place I work. Let's take a little look at that happy statistic. I mentioned earlier Professor Sean Accor and his extensive decade of research on the power of happiness in the workplace. Now, you as HR professionals might think, am I really responsible for happiness in the workplace? Well, there's an ROI for why you should feel you're responsible for happiness in the workplace. Because happy employees are 2 times more likely to stay in their job, have tenure, 2 times double the time of work focused on what it is that they're supposed to do as opposed to what they're not supposed to do. 10 times less sick days. I mean, you know the calculation in terms of if you could have 10 times less sick days in your company. 2 times believe that they are 2 times more likely to believe they're achieving their potential, and a 31% rise in productivity amongst that group of employees that consider themselves to be happy in the workplace. So a distinct ROI behind driving happiness in the workplace.
How much of those statistics are self-declared versus what's the methodology for capturing some of that?
It's a mix of different things. I mean, he's a Harvard professor, so a lot of it obviously is employees sitting down, filling out surveys, etc. But also a key methodology here is logbooks. So over a long duration, people keeping a logbook of their attitudes over several months, maybe even years, so that you get, it's not just in one moment, so that you get a good, consistent look at the data. So I just wanted to quickly share, taking it out into a real live example, a recent client of ours. So you might all be thinking, corporations or whatever, but this works everywhere. Here, there's a hospital has just become a client of ours. They look after about 300,000 patients. And they just launched a recognition initiative, which was designed to say, hey, all hospital doctors, nurses, everybody, we want you to spot when people do great things. Here was the very first recognition that came out the door. In place to deal with non-performing employees. The whole legal and managing skill problems or exits. But that's really the tail wagging the dog. Because if those sort of individuals make up maybe 1% or 10% of your company, so you've got this huge process that you must put everybody through because 1 or 10% of the organization needs something different. And I think that's what we're seeing is let's be cleverer about having processes to deal with the 1 or 10% of the organization, and let's breathe oxygen into the feedback for the rest of the 90%. I think that's the momentum that's underway. So an interesting space, definitely one to watch. I'm glad you were in the room.
What we also do in Adobe is through the shared service centre arena, we've got a group of individuals that coach line managers through in terms of making sure the performance dialogues
Are
meaningful
happening.
and
Yes.
happening,
Yeah.
and making sure the content is rich in terms of what they're looking to do with their own employees.
Yes.
So there's always continuous follow-up within the organisation.
Good. Great.
So that was a really big initiative for us as well, moving away from performance ratings. So we had a big strategy around the no labels for employees, because when you assign a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you are putting a label against that individual, and that's going to kind of forever haunt them. So getting rid of ratings, we moved towards quarterly check-ins. We put it mostly objective, and kind of score against those objectives, and then still have the multimeter every year to supplement feedback across the board, mostly
Yes.
from a development perspective. So that data is not compared. You're not comparing, kind of two individuals who are doing different roles.
Good.
So
Yeah,
I would choose
interesting
from a
insight.
multimeter perspective. They're two different roles.
Good.
So leadership skills for both roles could be different. So we're highly focused on this right now.
Good. So it's all about, feedback culture. I think humanity is about feedback, particularly positive feedback, because positive feedback outweighs negative feedback significantly. I mean, one negative comment, it takes virtually 100 positive comments for somebody to get over, the negative, and it's a kind of avoid at all costs the recognition sandwich where you say, you did a really great job at that meeting. It was absolutely fabulous, but you give that one little thing, that person's going to remember that but so much. If you could just separate these things, put them in slightly different spaces, and allow the person to celebrate for a little while the positive, it has a huge impact. So another very impactful piece of research that has just come out is from IBM. It's a huge survey, 19,000 workers across 26 countries, and they found that employees who are receiving recognition are 3 times more engaged, 2 times more likely to stay. And in terms of the characteristics of this type of recognition, it's very much like the Gartner study, that the more ways that employees are recognized, that it's not just a one mechanism, but you need many multiple mechanisms, that employees can easily save and remember the moments, to remember the stories. This is a way to build storytelling into your culture, and that they're timely, they're frequent, and they're interactive, involving your colleagues. Similar report, and I think this is the last piece of data that I'm going to wave across you. It comes from also Burson. This is a senior analyst at Burson. They did a major study too, and they found that in organizations where recognition is really occurring on a high level, that they had 14% higher performance on an index, which was an accumulation of employee engagement, performance and productivity, a kind of a portfolio, a cocktail index, 14% higher than the average company. So if any of you are thinking about, I'd love to put together a business case about this topic, the ROI data is there very richly, and I think that's the big transformation for me too over the last 5 years. There's a lot of quality organizations, Harvard professors, Burson, Deloitte, IBM, really studying the power of happiness, the power of feedback, the power of thanks, and coming up with some very significant figures that can help you build an ROI case. The specific client examples, this is happening in Symantec, I mentioned earlier, JetBlue. Anybody familiar with JetBlue? They're a leading airline in the United States, a little bit like Ryanair with excellent customer service, which Ryanair now claim to have, but JetBlue had that for a long time. And here's what they specifically found. For every 10% increase we see in people reporting having been recognized, we see it come directly through in a 3% increase in retention and a 2% increase in engagement. Direct attribution. Bechtel, it's a global engineering group, built the Channel Tunnel. In 1 year, they saw a 9% improvement in their Great Place to Work score. And so the best result they'd seen in any other area was 1 or 2 percentage points. So this stuff is very powerful. It seems very soft, talking about happiness, clapping, and rewarding each other, but it's very, very powerful. I wanted to share with you a very quick example of how this can morph, how this can be done differently. You think about the Years of Service Award, length of service award. It's kind of like thank you for not quitting, and you get this, this crystal object lands on your desk. If you're lucky, your manager remembers and gives it to you. Maybe you choose some branded item. We've reimagined that and said that's not really what employees want. That's just the traditional hierarchical approach. What's really important to employees is to be treated like human beings. If I've celebrated 5 or 10 years as a human being, what's really important to me in work? If I've been in a place 5 or 10 years, what's really important?
The relationships.
Spot on. It's the relationships I've had. the stories, the fun, the ups and downs I've had with the multiple colleagues. Not the manager that I just happen to have assigned to me at this particular moment. It's all the things I've done over those 5 or 10 years. So we've completely reimagined to reach out to the community of colleagues to celebrate those key milestones. And I'm going to show you an example.
Congratulations, Niamh, on reaching your 15-year anniversary with Global Force. I can't believe it's 15 years since we were in that tiny cramped office in City West together. Over that time, you've been such a professional, no matter which of the roles that you've held. So congratulations, Niamh, and here's another 15 years.
Hey Niamh, from one Global Force old-timer to another, really well done on your great 15 years of service. It's that great quality of determination that you've exhibited all down these years that makes you such a great person and such a great HR professional.
I've seen a notification about your time that's coming up, so I wanted to congratulate you on this achievement.
Do you remember those days, 15 years ago, when we started working together at trade shows? We had like a 3x4, and now we have a 30x40 line. What sort of progress have we made? And a lot of the progress, Niamh, is absolutely down to yourself.
Hi Niamh, you've always been so supportive and so encouraging, and you make Global Force a great place to work.
Fond memories when we were in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was 120 degrees, and we had